Alright, family, shalom. We here in the airport. I have this brother right here. He's on work though, so just say shalom to the family.
Shalom, family.
He saw the fringes and everything. He was like, "Yo, I'm an Israelite."
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Tribe of Judah, baby.
Here we go. So that's what's up. So we got Israelites out here working. The brother did a great job. Came over to me, asked me if I needed help or whatnot.
Yes, sir.
So right now we in the process of looking for Vocab Malone. So I appreciate that, my brother. What's your name?
Markel.
Markel? Nice to meet you, Markel. Shalom, Markel.
That's my name.
Oh, okay,
that's
cool.
What I would call.
That's what's up. All right. When you get a chance, look me up on YouTube. Type in DivineProspect. Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks a lot, bro. All right. Shalom.
Shalom, man.
Come on,
All right, young king. I'll see you later, man.
All right. Say bye, Kamani.
Look like a king in the making.
Shalom.
Shalom,
All right. So let's see if we can find Vocab. I want to see if I could track him real quick. He said he's checking his bags in. Let me see if I can find him. Let me see if I can find him. Let's see. Vocab, where are you? Where's Vocab at? Let me go check over here. Let's see. Vocab. All right, Vocab, where you at? Let me see. Okay, I don't see him over here. Let's see. If y'all see him, let me know. I don't see him. Okay, security checking is over there. He has to check his bag in. Let's see. Let's see if he's over here. Hashtag finding vocab. Y'all post it up. No, I don't see him. So he's gonna have to come through here. So I'm about to hit him up and see where he's at. Hopefully he didn't go through security checking. If he went through security checking, then I can't get at him. And we can't chat. No, I don't see him. Alright. So, that was the first run. I don't see him. But I'm gonna hit him up. I'm gonna hit him up right now. And I'm gonna see where he's at. Because he's getting dropped off. So he should be either checking his bag in or he should be sitting down waiting. So y'all stay tuned, man. Y'all stay tuned. Right now, what time is it? It's almost 7 o'clock. He got aboard at 7:30. It's gonna take him 7:45. It'll take him about 30 minutes to get through security check-in. 35 minutes. But yeah, we on the scene, man. We on the scene looking for vocab, man. Hashtag finding vocab. All right. I don't see him. I don't see him. All right. So let me call him, family. All right. I'm gonna see if I can try and go live again, but let me give him a call, and I'm gonna see if I can hit y'all back. All right. Shalom. Vocab Malone came into Atlanta. I'll let people know, briefly in your audience. I think they probably may be aware.
Right.
What was your intention for coming to Atlanta? And not that you wasn't intentionally not trying to set up a discussion, but you had a really busy schedule.
Yeah, so for the first couple of days, almost first 2.5 days, I think, I was obligated to do something. and it wasn't like it wasn't a public thing. So I wasn't in a situation where I could invite people to it. I wasn't in a situation where it wasn't a public thing. It's for a smaller group of people, and it had to do with apologetics. The main thing had to do with Hebrew Israelism apologetics, which I told Gorilla Hebrew earlier, and that's mainly what it was. And so I put on my social media, hey, I'm in Atlanta. I'm willing to talk to people, and I think I put something like atheist, Christian, Hebrew, Israelite, whoever, and then I had a friend say, what about Buddhists? I put Buddhists too. But so there's a lot of people in Atlanta. So I linked up with Nolan Turner, Jordan Ortiz, a dude I just met online, Matt. He's like a semi-pro baseball player. Someone else, I know I'm forgetting someone's name. I feel bad, but anyway, so
let me ask you a question. So, being that you're here, I recently seen your video that you did. The last two videos I thought were interesting. The one about the white Hebrew Israelites and the one about the NFL. Interestingly enough, I know I've met a couple of those NFL plays that you had, ex-plays that you had mentioned in the video. And they also tuned into the video and they said, wow, this is interesting. They didn't even know that you was doing actual, I don't even know if it's a series, but a video blog.
It's a particular area I've been studying for the past couple of weeks. Specifically, is Hebrew Israelism related to pro sports. But it seems like the main. By the way, you look to watch what's good. We need to remind everybody. I have a plane.
Limited time.
We're at the airport. We're literally at the airport. So in about 15 minutes, we have to cut it off no matter what.
Exactly.
But yeah, but that's been my study, because some chaplains involved with the sport kind of asked me to look into it, and it seems like mainly. So the kind of funny thing is, so I know this. Like people, I think people might think there's a level of stupidity that there's not. I think I'm actually partially making the Hebrew Israelite community aware more than they are. Now I'm not saying nobody knows, but almost everybody I talk to, when I tell them about the guys, most of the time I find I'm telling them. I already know that, but to me, this is how I feel about it. If truth is on your side, you don't have to. It doesn't mean you're not wise. It doesn't mean you're smart, but you don't have to do a bunch of tricks and games and hide a bunch of things. So I'm okay with saying, hey, here's some guys, mainly retired players. Here's some guys that are getting involved, and chaplains should care. So
my thing is, laid open, right? Say, listen, this is Christianity's position. This is this other position, right? Hebrew Israelism, what is coined. And this is what they both stand on, both of the premises that they stand on, the things that they're asserting, and let them be aware of what it is, so that way it won't, either or won't catch the other by surprise.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that.
Okay, cool.
I think a lot of conversations in the past were super unproductive. I'm not saying it's perfect now, because by and large, I think 90-some% of every Christian, every Hebrew Israelite meets, they actually don't understand most of what they're saying. I don't know if people understand that. They don't understand the theological background. They don't understand the way certain scriptures are being interpreted. I don't think they understand some of the claims being made. And so they're saying certain things, and I don't think that's good. I think the more information there is on both sides, because see, it's relatively easy. If a person says, here's the kind of Christian I am, you can go buy a systematic theology, or you can go to the church's website, and there it is. Pastor Dow, for example, Straightway Truth. I know you're not affiliated with that, but my point is, that's kind of a big known thing. Got like 160,000 subscribers. Go to his website. It's said for, I think, almost 8 years now, belief sect teachings coming soon. It's not there. Now you can sort through other articles and figure out things if you know certain terms, meaning I figured out, but it took me a while to realize they were oneness.
Have you tried, well, I mean,
that you would know.
How many, but you don't know a lot of Israelites that are Trinitarians. So, I mean,
the only one I know is Omar and those guys.
They're true Trinitarians?
According to the website, they're, now I'm glad they do have a doctrinal statement. It's laid out. And again, this actually to me is a critique of Hebrew Israelism. I know people don't like that term, but it's a critique of it. It's not systematic enough, and I'm going to be even honest to say, or forthright to say, like, maybe I think it takes a little bit of courage to write down what you officially believe and you put it there and you let it hang out. That's different than having to watch hours and hours of video. When it's written down, it's clear, there it is, it's embedded, and it stays. That takes a certain level of, we believe this is settled. Doesn't mean you never change anything. But
so you would feel
I think that needs to happen more.
If you would feel more comfortable if we laid it out for you, so that way you would know off the rip, hey, this is where they stand.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I would totally flip that around. It has nothing to do with me feeling comfortable. It has to do with, is this a logical system that can be exposed to the world to see for systematic scrutiny? It has nothing to do with how comfortable I am. Yes, certainly it's a little easier. I mean, the Jehovah's Witnesses do it, the Mormons do it, they have their gospel principles. Muslims do it in a different way. I mean, there's a large body of literature that is explaining, here's what it is. By and large, one exception I've seen so far is IUIC. They are the best at laying out what they believe and why they believe. I strongly disagree with the reasons, but they're willing to say, here's our Genesis 49 interpretation, put it online, and you can go and check it. To me, that's more, academic, and that's more, almost in a sense manly, because you're saying, here it is.
Now, I agree with that, because you got to understand, a lot of Christians are not checking to see what Hebrew Israelites believe. It's mostly the people who either confronted, have a family member that's in it, and or somebody that's an apologist that want to go and seek out and say, hey, let me see what this group believes and what it's about. Like you said, you can't really set up a real way of systematic theology if this is a developing group that hasn't been around long enough, even in the realm of academia, to lay things out like that systematically. You feel what I'm saying? So it makes it a little bit difficult when you're doing a discovery to try and figure out, okay, what do these groups believe? You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the major issue that you have with our community is not the ethnic ties situation, but it's more so with the theological structure in which we present who we are. Is
that's the main thing. However, so again, I try to be frank exactly what it is. It's not the ethnic claim in and of itself. I think that creates problems when you look at the claim historically, yes. But people can be mistaken about historical things. Like, I don't believe the earth is flat, for example. I think a person can believe that the earth is flat and their salvation is plenty intact. I think it's problematic, like it might point to some problems in my understanding of their understanding of things, and maybe discernment and maybe epistemological issues, whatever. That's not, same thing with if someone makes, so this is from my understanding, a mistaken ethnic claim. For example, I didn't grow up fully knowing what I was until later. There's a variety of reasons for that. If I would have died sort of under the wrong understanding of, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. But almost always when the ethnic claim is made, I see it get tied into a theological claim. Even so, Israel of God, they are super kind, warm-hearted in person to me. They always have been, and I respect them. They're generous. They try to take care of the community in a way that, to be honest, I think most camps say they're doing, but I think Israel of God actually does a lot better. Yet they still have a system that says we have a protocol, and what the protocol means is, and people talk about white people, it's not white people, it's other nations. So if someone thinks there's so if the second someone gets othered, and that's sort of an academic term that I think you know the background of, when they get othered and then put in some other kind of category of classification, theologically that's a problem, because I think that destroys what is the true unity of the body of Christ. I don't think it holds to the New Testament model. I really don't even think it fully holds a simple model. So it's not the ethnic claim in and of itself, because sometimes people say, oh, well, you can't recognize black people or Jews. When I looked into it, I saw the limba. It seems like you can't really argue with the fact that, especially on the male priestly line, that they have Semitic DNA. And there's other factors. They have multitude of witnesses that evidence what they're saying is true. Why? I don't have any problem with that. I'm not going to deny that. I don't think it's very relevant to the Hebrew Israelite thesis because of their geographical location, some other factors. For example, they're not even on the Western Hemisphere, things like that. But nonetheless, that's not a problem. Now, ironically, most of them are Christians. Most of them are practicing Christians, just with some different things. For example, abstaining from pork, things like that. And that's fine. It's not that. And besides, people say, oh, well, you can't admit black people are Israelites. Well, the claims of the camps is not that black people are Israelites anyway. It's a claim of all these different kinds of people are Israelites. And then you get the GMS, it's like anyone who agrees with the teachings in Israel.
So let me ask you a question. So your background from what you put out is German and Italian, correct?
Primarily, that's the main thing. If you know Italians, they're always going to say they're Italian no matter what, because people are like, oh, his father. Here's the thing. I don't care what tar says I need to call myself. I know what we do, which is, it's FBI. You may not be FBI, which is full-blooded Italian. You may not be But if you have, the idea is Sicilian blood is thick. It's like pasta sauce. It's like marinara. You're gonna claim that's who you are. So people are like, oh, you trying to trick us. No one's trying to trick me. That's what I say about myself. But so if I was trying to trick people, why would I never say? No one discovered that I had German ancestry. I told people because to me, it's irrelevant to the.
So let me ask you something along the theological line. So if you was looking at your lineage, right, and let's say you was able to trace your great grandfather all the way back to, let's say, the 3rd century AD or CE, right?
That'd be impressive.
Well, I mean, you can do that now with technology, documentation, etc. So the question would be, and I know you're aware of that Christendom did not lay hold of Europe until much later on. So the indigenous
Partially
culture.
true. Don't forget about Rome.
Well, yeah. So what I was going to ask you as far as the Lombards, all the Lombards were not Christians, right? That happened systematically over time.
I think they mainly were Aryans too in the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning.
With the I, not with the Y.
So before Aryanism, they had an indigenous culture.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, if any of those ancestors during that time were practicing their indigenous culture, would you say that they would be damned to hell simply because they didn't accept Christianity at that time? Or if you decided you wanted to practice it today, would you be wrong in doing so?
Yeah, and here's why. So I believe this is part of the gospel message. I do not think you'll agree with it.
No, go ahead. Just speak. Yes.
That all have fallen short of the glory of God, and that everyone stands guilty before their Maker. So because of that, everyone already has a destination from birth, which is the wrath of God. That's what every person deserves, and God is merciful to provide a way out. But so you've rejected the one substitute God provided. So He's only provided one way. He's not obligated to provide any. And so it doesn't matter what your indigenous belief was. It doesn't matter how long it's been believed. None of those things bear on the truth. So the antiquity of an idea, certainly the Romans respected it, but it doesn't make it true or false. The amount of family members that you have who hold to an idea doesn't make it true or false. None of those things bear on the truthfulness of an idea. So if a person, regardless of whatever their ancestry was, whatever they were doing, for example, in Sicily, the Arabs conquered for a while. There was a lot of Muslim influence and dominance. Let's say that I had some ancestors who practiced Islam. They denied Christ as a proper substitutionary atonement for sin, which is an Old Testament concept which the Quran says it affirms. What does that mean? That means they've rejected the one way God has made allowance for people to have right standing before.
And is that because of your disposition of being a Christian, that you have that presuppositional understanding that the New Testament is true, holy, and if we don't follow it to the jot and to the tittle, that we are damned ourselves? Because then that would also marginalize Jews, who you consider Jews, whoever they may be, in regards to the gospel message.
Oh yeah. So a person who ethnically says they're a Jew, regardless of how true or false that is really irrelevant to their standing before God. Now, I have some dispensational friends and some other types of friends who have somewhat different views about some of that stuff.
Like G-Con, for example.
But the thing is that if a person is ethnically Jewish and they're trying to eat kosher and hold Sabbath and things like that as a way to please the God of Israel, they've missed the boat because He's provided the Messiah and they've said no thank you.
So what if it was? What if it was part of their culture, right? Because I think the issue is the orientation and identifying what is being taking place in the Old Testament. Are you familiar with Lester Grabb's work in regards to ancient Israel and Second Temple Judaism?
I don't think so.
All right, so pretty much what he was laying out was that before you even get a written text, there was also a cultural paradigm that was already embedded into the minds of the people before the text was really written out. And a lot of these cultural elements you see in the Torah and the law.
So like pre-Sinai? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if you want to say it like that. Or even before they got settled in the land and actually started practicing it 100%, around kind of like understanding that. The point I'm trying to make is that he was saying that there was various factors that influence what we see in the Old Testament, such as diet, what the people ate and why they believe certain things were clean or unclean. The weather, right? The migration of different animals in and out the land, their proximity to either the central countryside or the Mediterranean Sea, coastal plain area, etc. All of these things had a bearing on why we see what we see in the text, if you're looking at it objectively outside the text. And when you go into the text, you have a theological layer that's overlaid onto the cultural and historical layer, which gives us these ideas of salvation, right, or soteriology when you look at it. So my question to you is, if you're saying that that's true, when you go to Romans chapter 2, verse 24 to 26, where Paul is talking about those who are a Jew inwardly, how would you interpret that for people who may not hear the gospel message, but within their own cultural paradigm, there is a means of salvation?
I don't think Paul is saying that, though. So what you're espousing is a form of universalism. If you're espousing it, universalism says the exclusive aspect of Jesus Christ in the gospel is should be taken away. The God of Israel, or the Creator, is more inclusive in his understanding, and that he's basically made multiple ways. Because what you just said about that scholar is, some of that's not totally unique from other stuff I've read, and most of the A&E scholars I read that say that stuff, they're simply trying to provide a naturalistic explanation for something. So I would want to ask a scholar like that, or someone that holds to it, say, if you do you believe supernatural revelation is even possible, for example?
I believe in divine revelation, but I don't believe in the inerrancy of the text, and I think that's what me and you are probably different. Simply because of textual criticism, because there's multiple manuscripts and there's no autograph, so therefore we have to reconstruct with the best of our ability, with a small margin of error, what the original would have said.
That doesn't bear on inerrancy, because inerrancy, the doctrine officially is the autographs are fully inspired.
Yes, but we don't have it.
But it also follows that we can recreate the autographs.
To a certain degree, but there's also going to be a margin of error, simply because we don't have the original to measure the copies.
But even sort of radical skeptics who debate about this, who write books about misquoting Jesus, like Bart Ehrman, says that all we're doing at this point in textual criticism is tinkering with the text. That's a quote. He used the word tinker, meaning we basically have the body of the text and we're playing around on the edges. Like, only radical reconstructionists who aren't very familiar with the field usually think otherwise. Like Bart Ehrman is, like, he's made a lot of money writing books attacking the authenticity of Paul's letters, and 7:13 he holds to, all kinds of stuff. He's been on the Daily Show. How many New Testament scholars get on the Daily Show, right? So, but even he says we're tinkering with the text. Like, so I think that to say we can reconstruct the autographs, I think is a very fair and valid thing to say.
So we got to leave in like less than 5 minutes.
So you do believe in divine revelation?
Yeah, I believe in divine revelation.
Okay, so the idea of what animals they would eat and not, what would that person say about Noah?
Well, that's looking at the text itself being redacted, right? So it was actually put together by the priestly class. So their understanding of clean and unclean will also go and address any kind of stories before that, such as Noah.
So you hold to a Yahweh strand, an Elohim strand, a priestly strand, and
that's a documentary hypothesis, which is
you
addressing.
Just said priestly class, so it seems like you hold to.
No. Well, I don't hold to that per se. It addresses three major issues, quote unquote, that was discovered in regards to the text, right? So you have doublets. Yeah, you have doublets that you find in the text. You have stylistic differences that you find in the text. You have things that are repeated that's found in the text consistently, and then you have things that are just not coherent with each other, because it seems as if somebody wrote. Same thing with the New Testament. You're looking at how that's done. Somebody wrote, walked away, maybe it came back.
You're saying parts of the Bible are incoherent with each other?
Meaning that it doesn't look like that. You okay?
Yeah.
Meaning if you do a straight reading in it, in the original language, you'll see that the breaks in it doesn't seem like it's coherent, meaning that it was more than one person that either redacted it or put the text together in its compilation.
Saying there's more hands than one involved is different than saying there's contradictions.
No, I didn't say the word contradiction.
But you said things that aren't coherent.
Yes,
that implies contradiction.
Do a straight reading, it doesn't seem coherent. So the objective is, how do you harmonize this if it doesn't seem like it's coherent in its straightforward reading? That's what I'm talking about. I didn't say contradiction, because it seems that way for people who don't look at it from the perspective of the people who are writing it and actually put the text together.
Yeah, but the sources you're quoting are people that have looked at it. You know what I'm saying? They're people that. Because here's what I find. I don't feel like a lot of the community you travel with actually understand some of what you're saying.
Most of them don't. And
what I mean by that is, you dabble in higher criticism, which is something that is, I mean, I'm just saying, the guys practicing are primarily Europeans who came out with this, and it comes with sort of a denial of the possibility of divine revelation. Now, you're saying you don't agree with that part, but I don't think a lot of people understand. I think a lot of the Hebrew Israelite community, according to what they say, has a much more steadfast view of the Bible than you do.
In the sense where,
I don't think they fully understand what you're saying.
In the sense where they presume that everything in the format that it is 100% right, correct, and exact. And what I'm saying is, I examine angles so that way, if something does come up that we may not be aware of, we can address it because now we've read, we've studied it, and now we can address these problems.
I agree with doing that. I agree with doing that. I think that if you want to call conservative, evangelical, whatever term you want to use, scholars should interact with the other side. So I'll give you a great example. I go to ETS. I've been like 4 times or so now. Evangelical Theological Society. About 2,000 people. And what they do is they meet first, and then after them, SBO meets, Society of Biblical Literature. SBO, which is Bart Ehrman and all the big shots, E.P. Sanders, they all go to that. Metzger used to go when he was alive. A lot of the top scholars at ETS stay around for SBL the next week. SBL is way larger because I don't think a lot of people know most biblical scholars are actually not believers in the Bible. That's true. But that's just the reality. So it's much larger. We're talking like 2,000 versus 10,000 or something. So they stick around and then they interact with their papers and stuff and do that. And the SBL people I've talked to by and large, not the ETS who go to SBL, but the SBL pure, are pretty prejudicial against anything that believes in divine revelation, anything that assumes, some of them, if you assume there's a real God, there's prejudice in biblical scholarship. The concept of absolute truth and things like that, they're pretty hostile towards a lot.
So let me ask you.
It seems like you draw from that sometimes.
So we got limited time.
Okay.
The objective is to take this information to make sure that my community is aware of it, so that way they can make the best decision in regards to their approach as it pertains to the text and the culture. Right. Okay. The last question I want to ask you, and then we're going to close out with this, is that your particular stance as well seems pretty progressive in regards to your outlook of the text. Right. I had asked you on our interview if you was aware of what 1689 feudalism is, as it pertains to
federalism?
Federalism, excuse me. As it pertains to your stance and what the differences are, because they have issues in regards to your stance. So I wanted to know, will you be able to give a full dissertation to your audience and to the Israelite audience as it stands? Because even when I spoke to James White, he had no clue what that was.
But if you said feudalism, you might not know what you're saying.
No, not feudalism.
He is a 1689er.
Yeah, not feudalism. I'm talking about your position.
Oh, progressive covenantalism?
Yeah, so he didn't have no clue what that is.
Yeah, but there's no way to do it here. So
no, of course not. So sum it up real quick.
I'll give you what they call inside baseball, meaning a look into the window of these discussions. Okay. So dispensationalism is new, and dispensationalism almost holds that there's 2 people of God, and thinks that there's going to be a pre-tribulation rapture, and then God's going to deal with Israel. Yep. And that's sort of been the American popular default position. And Americans, a lot of times, are ignorant of history outside themselves, and they think dispensationalism has been the default position for all of church history, which is literally the opposite. We're talking 200 years. Now again, something's newness doesn't mean it's false necessarily, so I'm not making that kind of argument, but I'm just saying they don't realize it's not the default position of the Christian church. The default positions, meaning what are the more standard understandings of eschatology and its relationship to Israel, have been much closer to what now would be called covenant theology. But covenant theology has primarily been promoted by, say, Presbyterian types, and one thing that non-Presbyterians who are still Reformed, I use technical language to talk real quick, I'm not trying to, there's just no other way to describe it. Non-Presbyterians do not like the fact that Presbyterians try to make an Old Testament and New Testament equivalent with circumcision into infant baptism. And so some of the moves or steps that Presbyterians who hold to a classic covenant theology, for example, Burkhoff is a great example because that's a standard systematic theology in that field. They'll say, no, but they'll say, I'm closer though still to this than some kind of dispensationalism, left behind and all that. And so this has always been mapped out, but within Reformed theology, Baptistic types, meaning those who believe in believers in baptism, have been a minority and actually been persecuted to a certain extent by Paedo-Baptists. And so their theology being fully developed has sort of taken longer. But there's always been a sort of a Baptist understanding of Reformed theology. And I'm not saying I'm a Baptist, but I'm Baptistic. But within that, the main difference comes with the circumcision to infant baptism piece. That's a big deal. That's a main piece. As well as there is a little bit more of allowance within progressive covenantalism, which what progressive covenantalism did was take some of the truths from dispensationalism and covenant and try to be a more healthy middle way. Prior to that, there was something called New Covenant theology. The problem with New Covenant theology is there was literally people saying solid, legit things that looked like progressive covenant, and people saying really wild things, all under this rubric. So they didn't want to hold to that because some people got really wild within this weird term got thrown on them. And so that's why progressive covenantalists came about. So kingdom to covenant is the main book, but the idea is that it's simply consistent with the 1689 London Baptist Confession, and prior to that, the way, especially when you see the New Testament authors laying out who is the church, who is Israel, saying we're trying to be consistent with that, and we don't find classic covenantal, we don't find dispensation to be as consistent as we would like. So another reason I like progressive cut, it's a little more allowance. It can be a-mill, it can be historic pre-mill, like I am.
So all of that falls underneath that?
Yeah, there's a little more allowance, and there's a little more allowance about the future of ethnic Israel. Some people are like all the way, there is no future. Saying all Israel will be saved just means all the elect will be brought in. That's one way. Or another version takes Paul saying, my brethren according to the flesh, and make sure you wrap that around at the end to say this end times revival must be related in some way to an ethnic Israel, which is close to where I fall, but it's not dispensationalism.
One hallmark that I see of a lot of Calvinists is that there's not really a lot of talk in eschatology. So
not as much.
To wrap this up,
not as much,
what is your position in regards to the Jews as it pertains to eschatology in the end times?
If a person is ethnically Jewish, no matter what degree, no matter if they're wrong or right, if they have not believed and bowed the knee to Christ as Lord and Savior, they will face wrath like any other person, regardless of whoever they are. It just doesn't matter in any way. Jesus is a definitive mark. You are either with me or against me. This is Jesus. Like he's very I am the way, the truth. Definite articles. You know, no one comes to the Father but through me. I'm a gate, I'm a door. So because of that, it doesn't matter. That's why it doesn't matter very much about who's really an ethnic Israelite, because and so here's where the controversial part comes in. Like, Christians don't all agree with it. We're not getting grafted into Israel as much as anyone who becomes a believer is simply being part of God's new Israel, which is God's covenant community, which was always intended because of the Abrahamic promise in Genesis 15. They're part of essentially what is a new organism. Now this is where people don't like this theology, call it replacement theology. We don't call it that because we're saying it's based upon a covenant that God has always underlined.
Yeah, he's always had his door open for Gentiles to come in.
Yes, but the universalistic, the universal vision of the Old Testament was never fully realized in the Old Testament because Christ did not come.
And I think that's where we disagree.
Which part?
The last thing you just said. Because I believe they had enough understanding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in their time when the text was closed to understand how to obtain salvation and to look for a Messiah figure to come. Right?
Okay.
So
we can talk about that. So some of that is inside baseball, some of that Christians don't agree with, but I don't find the eschatology thing maybe last thing. One reason Reform folks talk about it is because they try to be a little more, I'm not saying they always are, balanced or I don't play ball in the intellectual realm.
They don't like the gray area.
And some of the sensationalism of a lot of the eschatology of like Left Behind and all that is very embarrassing to a lot of Reform folks. It's very extremely embarrassing. And they also find a lot of Christians are just absolutely carried away. Everything is what is this and they're not really focusing on the here and now. They're not really working out other very important points of theology. And what happens is, instead of focusing on the past event that has ramifications for the future, which is the cross, they're focused on a future event that's less certain because it hasn't happened yet. And a perfect example is check this out. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
All the Israelites did not fully understand Christ's mission. It took a while. I think it took until after Pentecost. Because even after the resurrection, will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel? They still thought that was what's going to jump off.
He said, no, you got work to do.
Here's what you do until... So I think we should have a little epistemic humility where we say, this event is still future. You don't start throwing people into hell because they don't believe in the rapture like you do, or they believe a different thing about nation of Israel. That seems really off balance.
Well, people will argue that and say because of TULIP, some people already have been predestined to go that route.
Well, I believe in predestination. I mean, read Ephesians 1, you can't escape from it. But
well,
not just Ephesians 1, read Isaiah.
So look,
God's I'm going to do what I want.
One thing I will say with you that I agree with is, even when it comes to prophecy and eschatology, me personally, I dibble and dabble in that here and there. But my main concern is how do we fix the community now from the template that the scriptures have left?
Well, we partially actually agree then. That's why you don't hear me focus. GMS is constantly criticizing. You don't hear these guys prophesy, they're not prophets. It's a different reason. It has to do with gospel implications for now. And that has to do with wholeness of communities, which Christians have sometimes excelled in, sometimes failed in. It has to do with other things. I'm not saying the future is irrelevant because we live in light of the future. We're supposed to be bringing the kingdom to earth in a certain manner of speaking. I'm not a post-millennialist, if you know about that. I'm not saying that, but that is what we're to do. But there's a lot out of balance.
And would you agree that there are some Calvinists that make Calvinists like you in American history look pretty bad in regards to
Calvinism,
Yeah,
like the Matthews, for example. You know what I'm saying?
There's no doubt about that. But the thing is, there's almost, because of America's such a racist past, there's no Christian denomination that's untouched. The Calvinism gets brought out, I think, a little bit more because early Christianity was so Calvinistic influence. But past the Second Great Awakening, American Christianity is not as Calvinistic. There's sort of been a revival in the last 20 years or so, like that, neo-Calvinism, I'm sure we'll call it. But yes, but I don't think it's limited to Calvinism. So there's some people who have a thesis of Calvinism makes racist or something like that. I disagree with that, and that's one of the reasons why in February I did the 30 Black Christians you should know, and a number of them were Calvinists. I only focused on 6 Calvinists, but a lot of people in other categories, like women, for example, Phyllis Wheatley, were also Calvinists. To deny that, yet they were still freedom fighters. They weren't just one code, they were still freedom fighters. And they had to deal with racists from every denomination. Every denomination. There is no denomination that wasn't in a great book. Jamar Tisby, I don't agree with every single thing in it, but Jamar Tisby, great brother, wrote a book called The Color of Compromise, and it's about the white evangelicals compromise with racism. And it's just a fact.
We're going to close out, and I'm only doing this not to cut him off, but because I know he has a flight. But the last thing I'm going to say, as we're wrapping up, do you believe that when the white missionaries went into Africa, that they brought salvation to the indigenous people there, just like they've done in Australia and India and all these other places where, and you know, we could say Anglicans actually the ones that went into most of the parts.
Well, I would say this: whoever,
so I want to know that answer.
Whoever brought the gospel and whoever believed it
brought salvation to those people.
But it didn't matter the color because there's black missionaries who went to Africa as well.
Well, that's true.
So whoever color, if
also,
they preach a true gospel, for example, Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't think they bring salvation to anybody when they go in Africa.
No. What I'm saying is, so are you saying that the indigenous culture that's there is not sufficient enough in order for them to obtain means of salvation within their own
indigenous culture is sufficient enough.
Say that loud.
No indigenous culture. Whether it's white barbarians, whether it's people in the middle of Africa building giant pyramids, because it wasn't only Egypt that amazing structures got built. Wherever it is, no indigenous culture is sufficient to reach to God's perfection. So
with the exception of accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Yeah, and that's not a cultural thing.
Oh no, I know that's not a culture.
You keep your culture, get Christ, He sanctifies your culture, and you keep it.
Paul said that he count those things as dung, so even in that sense.
But he still said, I'm a Hebrew of the Hebrews, so it's not like he forgot who he was. And
I think he was making an appeal to his people who may have been in the
I agree. Well. I think I know what you're saying, but
let's hold off on that.
Yeah, we gotta go.